Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for another Hot Toys 1/6 scale Back to the Future figure unboxing and review. Or should I be saying figures and unboxings, as in plural? We're not just taking a look at one figure in this review, we're taking a look at both Doc and Marty based off their appearances in Back to the Future Part 3. Now I got mine from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is in the description below. They have Pay in 4 and a loyalty program. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe, bell notification icon, and join button, so you're notified as soon as a brand new Hot Toys review goes live on the channel. As for the box art for both Doc and Marty, no, unfortunately, this is not a 2-pack as much as I wish it was. I mean, who's buying Doc by himself, and who's buying Marty by himself? You're always going to buy the pair. At least I think you are. If you're not, tell me why in the comments below. Maybe I've missed something. Up the top for both boxes, we have Back to the Future Part 3. It's glossy on an otherwise matte print. We then have Doc and Marty. And there are so many filters on these images. It's kind of crazy. We've got artifacting, we've got grain, we've got this sepia effect, and we've got all this scratchy detail on the surface as well. It's almost like they were having a meeting and the box art designer was like, "Hey, Howard, which filter do you want me to use?" And he just said, "Well, box art designer, yes." So he took that and ran with it and just used all the filters. Down below, Marty and Doc Brown. And the ticker at the bottom, it is a little bit textural. You can feel all the dates and times as you run your finger across it. On the sides of the boxes, we have the same symbol for both packages. It's a Back to the Future 3 logo with the lasso around the central image of the DeLorean, a silhouetted image of it being pulled by some horses with the sunset in the background. It's bright, it's colourful, it's glossy, I love it. Then for the rest of the image, we have the background from the front image spilling over the edge of the packaging. So for Doc, it's the barn, whereas for Marty, I'm pretty sure that's Main Street. By the way, just let me know if you like these joint unboxings, or do you prefer I put the spotlight on each character individually in their own unboxing and review videos? Not for these two though, I'm not going to go and reshoot this. I think once is enough for me. Around the back, we have Back to the Future Part 3, a punchy, vibrant blue, orange, and yellow logo on a brown background. We've got the clock tower and some warnings and legal info. Got another question for you all. Which is your favourite Back to the Future movie? For me, I don't know, I'm really struggling to pick between the first one and the second one. The first one might just take the win though. What is this, Hot Toys? Some sort of car ad? The perfect way to travel through time. Get your DeLorean today. I mean, they haven't even made the Part 3 DeLorean. I would get it if they had. It looks cool with the old-timey bits and pieces on the front and the white wall wheels. We'll have to wait and see if that prototype eventually gets made, but I'm not holding my breath. Hot Toys, they tend to skimp out on the vehicles, especially when they've already made previous versions of them. Now, I'm pretty darn curious to see what these guys look and feel like in hand. As collectors, I'm guilty of it. I'm sure plenty of us are. The number one metric most of the time that we use for our measure of quality is the feel. Is it nice and hefty, or does it feel cheap and nasty and lightweight and terrible? For Marty, even though he's on a slim-framed body, he doesn't feel cheap and nasty. He feels nice and premium. And the tailoring looks sharp, so too does the head sculpt. Just first impressions. For Doc, same exact thing. I can feel the weight there. Tailoring solid. And finally, a new head sculpt without that goofy open mouth expression and the holes in the side of his head for glasses that he doesn't even come with. Talking about you, Back to the Future Part 1, Doc. What we are going to do now, though, is get all of their accessories laid out in the light box and take a closer look at everything they come with. Starting off with the display bases first. Interestingly enough, they went with the rectangular style, which is different to the Back to the Future 2 display bases, which is different to the Back to the Future 1 display bases. All three films have different styles of display bases. None of them match, which drives my OCD just absolutely crazy. At least these two match, and the artwork lines up, so you can complete the scene, the DeLorean being pulled by the horses. Whereas for Doc Brown's display base, it's just a landscape. You have Back to the Future Part 3 on this textured surface. This is glossy, so it stands out. This is nice and grippy. And around the front, is this the first time they've continued the artwork from the display base onto the nameplate? I think it is. I like this. Keep doing this, Hot Toys. For Doc Brown, we have a crotch grabber, whereas for Marty, for some unknown reason, why do they keep doing this, we have a waist clamp. It's not like Marty's just too small for a crotch grabber to work. I know he isn't, because I use crotch grabbers in all of my Marty display bases. I literally just rip out the waist clamp, pop a good old crotch grabber in, and it works perfectly fine. For Doc's accessories, we get this sick looking rifle. It's huge. It's nice and metallic and shiny. There are gold sections, copper sections, silver sections. You also have some wood grain paneling on the stock and the underside of the barrel. Plus, you can actuate this piece down below as though he's loading the rifle. The only complaint I have is it's very clean. We don't have any speckling on the surface, no dirt and grime, nothing. It's factory fresh. We do get a pistol each. Oh, and by the way, I popped all of Doc's accessories on the left side and all of Marty's accessories on the right side. It's pretty self-explanatory. This is Doc's pistol, and it's a little bit more red as compared to Marty's that's a touch more gunmetal. But the sculpt is the same. You can move the hammers back, you can also rotate this middle section, and because it's a speed loader, I guess, you can rotate this section out, and that's where they'd pop the bullets in. If you're wondering if the actual rotating canister can be moved out, no, it can't. It just rotates in the main body of the gun. Then for the handles, they're both painted in brown. This is pretty neat. It's basically some primitive body armor. It's the door of a furnace or stove. It's what Marty hung around his neck to protect himself. You have some washers in the crevices on the outside, some mottled metal texture and some intricate sculpt work. Whereas on the inside, it is a lot cleaner, but there is so much more texture. It looks a lot like cast iron. It's not this thing, it's made of plastic. There is this twine wrapped around it, and that's what you use to hang this around Marty's neck. You'll see that later. Okay, these might just be my favorite accessories here. We've got some old dry cell batteries. You can see it says that number 2 on the canister. They've been taped to the walkie-talkies. And my favorite detail? There's even some teeny tiny telescopic antennas. Just be careful, the last thing you'd want to do is break those miniature little antennas on the walkie-talkies. I like how they had little tidbits like this. Basically, Marty invented the Frisbee, Frisbee's pies with the Mercedes looking logo in the middle. There's this mottled metal texture on the surface in the middle, some holes down below, there's even some charring on the bottom. It looks like this was used to make some pies. Then we get this mini DeLorean. This is what Doc was using to explain the plan. He was driving this thing around and telling Marty exactly what they were planning to do. It says time machine on the front. It's dirty, it's grimy, and there's even some wood grain paneling on the proper rotating teeny tiny little wheels. This thing is so sweet, and the best part is you don't have to have them holding it. You can literally just pop it on the display base as some set dressing. Next up, we do get this little cardboard wrapped item. We will unwrap it. I'm dreading doing that because how am I going to rewrap it? And Doc Brown's pocket watch, which does have a printed face and a real metal chain. Alright, we gotta do it. You can take off this picture with the tombstone. You can then unravel the string, and I so hope there is something in there. Imagine if we go to the hassle of opening this and there's nothing in there. Luckily, there is something in there. You can see it's a picture of Doc and Marty, and there's also some teeny tiny little writing down below. I'm really surprised that they actually popped something in there. This could have easily been a piece of cardboard, and they could have just skipped the picture altogether. I'm glad they didn't. Well, that thing will never be the same. Paper accessories. Gotta love them. Now, you do get some interchangeable outfit options for Doc. He's got a long jacket, a gun belt, a bow tie, and a neck scarf. We'll pop all of this on, of course we will. The same thing goes for Marty, interchangeable outfit options for his Clint Eastwood look. Also a gun belt, different to Doc's, with some bullets that aren't actually in slots. This is one sculpted piece glued to the surface. A neck scarf, as well as a poncho. I almost forgot because I just had this sitting out of frame. We also get the hoverboard for Marty, and it is the exact same hoverboard as the Back to the Future Part 2 one. Got the foot strap down below, and it can rotate on this green section. There's some texture to keep his foot locked in position. We also have some printed details on the surface. It says hoverboard, and also 2 little areas where the Mattel logos were supposed to be. On the underside, also fully detailed, and I dig the vibrant color of this thing. I always have. Would I ever display it with the Part 3 figures? No, Probably not. And lastly, for Marty at least, a full array of hands. Trigger finger hands, open palm hands, closed fist, gripping hands, the full works. But for Doc, you only get 2, and that's just sad. Why do we only have 2 hands for Doc Hot Toys? What the hell? The skin texture is good, he's quite tan, there's some shading on the knuckles, plenty of vein work, and compared to Marty's hands, they do look a lot more detailed. They look like the hands of an older person. Versus Marty's hands, they're smoother, still skin texture, and still some shading. What we are going to do now, though, is get Marty and Doc themselves out here. Standing straight up and down in the light box, no crazy poses or accessories or anything like that. If you're thinking, Justin, what about the hat? That's an accessory. No, it isn't. It's part of his head sculpt, and we will discuss that a little bit later. I want to say this right off the bat. I'm not a massive Back to the Future 3 fan, and I'm not a cowboy and western fan. So this type of figure being literally a straight up cowboy outfit, normally I'd shy away from this. I do not have any other cowboy figures in my collection, not even a Clint Eastwood, who is an iconic figure, I know. With all of that being said, even I can't deny this guy looks pretty bloody brilliant. He's not perfect, and we do have a couple of things to discuss, which we will. But the tailoring, the proportions, the choice of body, and the head sculpt, all of those get ticks. All of that positive stuff I just heaped onto Marty, head sculpt, outfit proportions, all of that applies to Doc. The tailoring with these 2 figures might just be some of Hot Toys' finest tailoring ever. They put a lot of effort in here. And they tried some new stuff, little metal hooks and clasps and various bits and pieces that work really well for both of these guys. Specifically for Doc, his outfit is more complex than Marty. It's more visually interesting, he's taller, he's a little bit lankier, and finally, we have a brand new head sculpt for Doc. He too isn't perfect. I haven't quite yet decided who is my favourite out of these 2 figures. I'll have to let you know later on. Up close and personal, kicking things off with Marty's head sculpt. For the sake of consistency across all the various other segments, let's just do that. We'll start off with Marty first, and then we'll move on to Doc Brown. I do currently have him without the gun belt on, and without the poncho, and without the neck scarf. We will slowly but surely work our way up to full-on Clint Eastwood. I really like this head sculpt. I didn't know that I was going to. Blogger pics, they let this head sculpt down. It looked soft, it looked very smooth, and the expression, they didn't sell it to me. In person, it's a whole different story. This is a solid head sculpt. Still not the best in the line. I would easily give that to Back to the Future Part 2 Marty, or even the new version of Back to the Future Part 1 Marty. This one is a very close third, over and above the original Marty back in the day. The skin texture, painted and sculpted, there's even some freckling on the surface. I like the expression with the furrowed brow. He looks concerned, and he should be. He's stuck in the Old West for crying out loud. The mouth being slightly parted, it doesn't bother me. Nor does the sculpted hat. This hat is fixed in position. That means it's going to be perfectly placed every single time right out the box. It's not going to ride up and fall off constantly. But it also means that you can't take it off, so you're stuck with it permanently. Now, could they have done a swap-out hairpiece? Oh, absolutely. This fringe coming over the top, that is begging to be a swap-out hairpiece. And it would have even added some depth between the fringe and the forehead. I'm not complaining, I still like the way it's painted. There's even some feathering of the brown paint, so it looks like there is some skin poking through some very fine wispy pieces of hair. They could have done a swap-out hairpiece, they decided not to, and I don't really care. I think this totally works for Marty from Part 3. The only real complaint I have is his neck, it looks kinda nasty. The skin tone is nowhere near as good as the head sculpt, and you can see the seam line running down the side. The tailoring here, it's just Hot Toys flexing. This shirt is very thin and it's a little bit baggy, so it looks nice and natural. You also have another shirt underneath, so if you have the collar open, you can see that poking through, not an ugly, nasty neck connector. Over the top, you've got this thicker, sturdier jacket. It hugs the body exactly as you expect, and the lapels sit down nice and flat. I also like that his arms can go very flush down by his sides. A little handy hint, if you want them to go even closer like this one, you can rotate the joint, the bicep, and then bend the elbow, and then the arms will come in just a little bit closer. closing up that gap where you can see the light poking through. His pants are a darker shade of brown as compared to the jacket, and they're super form-fitting, except for down below where they flare out. Wearing flared pants? Oh, so cowboy, Marty. You also have some proper pockets. If you want to pop his hands in there, go for it. There is some dirt and grime, some speckling at the bottom, and that transfers onto the boots, which are high-topped cowboy-style boots. The stitching, nicely sculpted, very clean, and on the underside, you even have some stitching around the edges, plus more speckling of dirt and grime. If you're wondering what he looks like with some additional parts and pieces on, and also how I'm going to display him, well, I'm pretty curious to find out myself. Right, so the gun belt, it's a permanent addition for me. After this video is done, it ain't coming off, I promise. The only issue I have is that the pistol does bulk up one side, so his jacket tends to flare out a little, which does alter the silhouette. And the proportions, they are very, very realistic. So when you have something just messing around with them, yeah, I do struggle. With some futzing, or maybe if you peel back the jacket to reveal the pistol, just work with it, then it may not be as big of an issue. Just something to be aware of. You do have the bullets around the back, very hidden. Not sure why they're not more towards the front, but it is screen accurate. And the belt portion, it's not a real belt. There's no little tooth that sits in the holes. It's just held in place with friction, which I think is the better option. If they had gone with a proper belt, that little thing sticking out, that would have made this very hard to work with. As it stands, it's pretty straightforward. Slide it in and friction holds it all in place. I don't think this is pleather. I thought initially it might be. Now that I'm seeing it in person, it almost looks like this is some faux grain printed on the surface, rather than being some laminated piece of pleather. If it isn't pleather, thank you, Hot Toys. You all know I hate that darn stuff. You can slide his revolver into the holster, and there's a little strap that goes over the top of the hammer. And around the back, you do need to tie this strap in position. If it is pleather, be careful. If it isn't, then thankfully, I don't think you're really going to have to worry about it. I have stopped partway through the process because I realized when I popped the poncho on, you're not necessarily going to be able to see this plate underneath. I may as well show it to you here and now, and show you how he looks without the jacket on, just with the shirt on. I reckon it helps the proportions even more. It shows you how skinny and lanky he is and makes him look even more realistic. If you want to have him without the jacket or the poncho and just go for this look, I'm actually tempted to try that every now and then. Now that's more like it. It's very Clint Eastwood, and you know the gag in the movie Cowboys, Clint Eastwood. This is my display option. I'm going to have him with the poncho on all the time. Gun belt, poncho, and neck scarf. Now the neck scarf, it does ride up a little bit high. I wish it was wired. If it was, you'd be able to sit it down and reveal a little bit of his neck, making him look more proportionate. As it stands, because the poncho is this thick, sturdy material, it will ride up, and with a little bit of futzing, you can get it to work. It's not the end of the world. The poncho does have magnets cinching it in position underneath his armpit on the left side and around the front on this side, because this panel is supposed to fold over the front, and it does. The magnets do their job, keeping everything in position. The same thing around the back. This pinch point, there are two magnets here. They lock together and they keep this kind of flush and tight. It pulls the poncho around the back. You will have to just work with it and get it to sit properly. Once you do, I think it hugs the body exactly as it needs to. And there's this texture on the surface that makes it look aged and worn. All of the little printed details are spot on. These little tassels down below add another dimension. If you want to, you can move them to the side and almost make it look like they're blowing in the wind. It's not perfect. The poncho, I reckon, would be even better if it was wired. Still, this display option is ace. As promised, moving on to Doc Brown's head sculpt, I do think it's a significant improvement over the other two Doc Brown head sculpts with that crazy open mouth expression. I do still like that one. This one is a little bit better. The likeness to Christopher Lloyd is there, especially from that angle. There's a lot of skin detail. You've got these little freckles on the surface, some frown lines, and the furrowed brow, just like Marty. Unlike Marty, he's got a proper sculpted neck with some baggy skin down below. So it doesn't look as cheap and nasty for the neck part versus Marty with that split down the side. That was really weird. The hair swooshes out, there's flow to it, there's a lot of individual strand detail. And no, the hat is not removable. Just like Marty, it's fixed in position. They've also gone quite dark on the skin tone, which makes sense. He was tan in the movie. He'd been in the Old West for a while. The sun beating down on him, he would be more tan. I do have him without his pocket watch and the various chain bits and pieces going into the pockets. I will do that in just a second. I am dreading it. I know I have to do it, and we'll pop the bow tie on. Then we'll try the cowboy style outfit with the long jacket and the neck scarf. You do have multiple different collars, a white one and just the shirt collar. And if you angle the neck a little bit too high, you will see the neck connector at the bottom. When you have the bow tie on, I don't think that's going to be as big of a deal because it'll cinch the collar a lot tighter. Then for the vest, you have some little metal clips holding it together, multiple little pockets for that chain to go into, and this long jacket with this checkered pattern over the top. His arms don't quite go down as far as I would like by his sides. They stick out just a little. Not enough to ruin the proportions for me though, he still looks quite realistic. Well, I did it, and it was just as frustrating as I thought it was going to be. Threading this metal chain through this slot in the vest, then into the pocket, then the pocket watch in the other pocket, and managing this chain, then flipping up the collar and doing the bow tie and tightening it, then popping the head sculpt back on. All of that stuff, very involved, very frustrating. Now that you've seen this look, if this is one you want to go with on your figure, well, now you know if you like it or not, and you only have to do it once, whereas I will have to take it off and put it on multiple times in this video. Worth it, hopefully, to give you an idea of which look works best for your display. It does, however, solve the issue with the visible neck connector. Even when you move Doc's head sculpt all the way back, there's only a teeny tiny little gap. That bow tie, it cinches the collar, so you don't have to see the neck connector. For that reason alone, I'm sticking with the bow tie in my display. Chances are, I'm just going to leave the pocket watch on there too. Having this chain around the front, it adds a little bit more visual interest to his vest. His pants are straight and quite thin and baggy, which is great for posing. And they're not just brown. Part of the weave of the fabric is this lighter color, which gives it a little bit more texture. His boots, not quite as high as Marty's, still cowboy-esque in my opinion. The stitching, sculpted, of course, and you also have some wrinkling sculpted into the surface. They have hit that with some lighter brown dry brushing to make it look like leather. Then on the underside of the soles, they've done some dry brushing of lighter brown around the edges, so it looks more worn, even though there is no sculpted tread to speak of. If you're wondering what he looks like with the longer jacket and the neck scarf on, remember just before when I said that I wish Marty's neck scarf was wired because it got in the way of posing and rode up a little bit too high? Doc's is, and for no real reason. His neck scarf, it's all the way down here. You don't even really need to be able to pose it. I'm not complaining, I'd still rather have wires than not. I just wish they'd also given them to Marty's neck scarf. You can also move it up if you want to hide that little neck connector, which will now become visible because for this look, you do have to take the bow tie off. Now his long jacket, there's a lot of dirt and grime down the bottom. The pockets are real if you want to pop something in there. And it is wired down the front. But not the bottom, which I think is arguably the more important area to be wired. Because if you want it to drape naturally and hug his body, you are going to want to cinch it around his leg. You can't do that because the bottom part, like I said, is not wired. He now has his gun belt on, and this is a real proper belt with that little tooth that sticks out. You have to thread everything through and slide this strap back. Totally fine, not a huge issue. And you can slot his pistol in the holster. Again, I don't think this is pleather, and that's a good thing. Hot Toys, please keep staying away from pleather. Nobody likes that stuff. Now this chain is still supposed to be here, you're not supposed to remove the pocket watch, and now that we have split the vest open, you can see the little metal clasps that the hooks will slide into to keep this locked in position when you do up the vest. Overall, do I like this look for Doc? Oh yeah, I do. Even though chances are I probably will display Doc with all that stuff on, because I said it's my favorite look for him, I did have to take it all back off, reset them back to stock, because we do have to try some head swaps. But before we do, couple of things I forgot to mention earlier. He does have some details, some little bits and pieces on the top of his hat, including this horse, which I think is a nice touch. And Marty's jacket is not wired, unlike that long jacket for Doc. Yeah, I don't think this works. His neck connector is significantly bigger than the head sculpt that comes with this body. Therefore, his neck is really long, and the neck connector is super visible. Not to mention, I just don't love this head sculpt, with these holes in the side of his head and no glasses to pop in. I really don't think this works. This is so much better than that Doc head swap. This is almost displayable. The only issue is that the skin tone between the neck and the head sculpt doesn't match, but it doesn't match the stock head sculpt with the hat on anyway. And the head does look a little bit too big for the body. It throws off the proportions ever so slightly. Not a huge deal, just something to keep in mind when you are considering head swaps for both Doc and Marty. Great Scott, this is how you do a line. It's not perfect, each of the figures do have little imperfections, things that frustrate me. Doc Brown from Back to the Future 1 with that reused head sculpt. And Back to the Future 2 Marty without any of the licensing, no Nike logos, no Mattel logos, no Pepsi logos. You just don't do that for a Back to the Future Part 2 figure, but they did. As a group, as a collective representing all three films, they are greater than the sum of their parts. When you have them fully assembled, this is iconic. This, to me, is super nostalgic. And I'm just so happy that Hot Toys completed this lineup. I would still love to see Biff. I would still love to see George McFly. There are a bunch of other characters I would love to see from Back to the Future. But for now, if they want to take a little bit of time off from BTTF and do something else, classic, iconic, Terminator maybe, I wouldn't be mad at that. Going over articulation on Marty first, and then we'll move on to Doc. Starting off with his head sculpt, it's on an articulated neck, meaning there's a ball joint down the bottom, and up underneath the head sculpt, a double ball peg. Combined, looking forward to there, going back to there, swivel and pivot side to side. The arms will go up to there, they will go forward and back, butterfly joint at the shoulder with just all the range going forward. It also hinges up and down. Swivel at the bicep, double bend at the elbow going the full way, and for the wrist peg, it's a hinge and swivel. The torso crunches forward and back, pretty much unhindered thanks to this baggy and single layer shirt. There is no padding underneath it, that's just the base body, you can feel through it. Swivel and pivot side to side. The legs will go forward to there on soft ratchets. You can kind of feel the teeth. You don't have to listen to them though. If you want to have it in between the teeth, the legs will sit where you want them to. Going out to there, swivel at the upper thigh, double bend at the knee going the full way, and for his ankles, even though he is wearing relatively high-topped boots, they are quite wide at the top, so you don't just get swivel, you also get forward and back as well as ankle tilt. Alright, Doc's turn, starting off with his head sculpt. It is different to Marty, it's not on an articulated neck, it's on a fixed neck with a ball joint down the bottom. Does that mean less range? Surprisingly, no. It means way more range. Looking forward the full way, going back to there, it does get a little bit gappy, although you can futz with the collar to cover up that neck connector. You also get swivel and pivot side to side. The arms will go up to there, going forward and back on soft ratchets, butterfly joint at the shoulder that hinges up and down. Swivel at the bicep underneath the jacket, double bend at the elbow, also going the full way just like Marty. Then for the wrist peg, a hinge and swivel. The torso does have multiple layers to contend with and some padding. You've got the shirt, underneath the shirt, you also have a vest and the outer jacket. Plus you can add more layers if you want to, which will limit articulation even further. Crunching forward and back, swivel and pivot side to side. The legs will go forward to there, also hindered by the padding. It's kind of like a swimsuit. The padding ends right here and it works its way up the torso and over the top of the shoulders. So it pads out the thighs, the torso, and it gives him some bulk for the traps to fill out the jacket. The legs will go out to there, then there's a swivel at the upper thigh. Double bend at the knee on ratchets going the full way, and with Doc's boots, similar to Marty, they are quite high-topped yet very wide, so you get forward and back, swivel, as well as ankle tilt. Moving on to the 3 cool and 3 annoying things. The first annoying thing for both Doc and Marty is that their hats, they're part of the head sculpt. They are not removable. So if you were hoping to finally be rid of that Back to the Future 1 Doc head sculpt by popping this one on that body and removing the hat, unfortunately, you can't. The second annoying thing is Marty gets 6 extra hands, whereas Doc, he has to make do with only 2, and that's just not good enough, especially when the skin tone is as specific as this one is. It's not like we can just use random hands from other figures in the collection. They just wouldn't match. The third annoying thing is we have no fewer than 3 completely different display-based styles in the same line. It's all Back to the Future. I'm a huge fan of consistency, and this is quite clearly the opposite of that. The first cool thing is, I reckon the accessories make these figures. If you missed out on Back to the Future 2 Marty, now you have a hoverboard, so you get some classic Back to the Future accessories. And you get some new ones. This mini model of the DeLorean with the rolling wheels. I don't know why, I just love this little thing. The second cool thing is options. You have so many different outfit options for both Doc and Marty. You can go poncho or no poncho, scarf or no scarf, bow tie or no bow tie, long jacket or not. Infinitely customizable. The third cool thing is just how good the head sculpts are. I didn't think I was going to like them as much as I do. Now that I see them in person, especially Marty, it's a very strong head sculpt. Wrapping up on Hot Toys Back to the Future 3, Doc Brown and Marty McFly. This is a little bit bittersweet for me because I know at least for a while, I won't be making any more Back to the Future videos. I don't think we're gonna get any other figures from this line. I think this is it. Is it a good way to end the line? I think so. You end with the final movie, and they've delivered some very, very good figures. Not perfect, and certainly not my favorite in the line. I think my favorite still has to be the new Back to the Future 1 Marty, and Back to the Future 2 Doc Brown. Maybe. Although I could go for the Back to the Future 1 version as well. It's a toss-up between those two. So that means by default, these two come in at third place. And that's not to say they're third best. Heck, if you like these more than the other figures and this is your iconic look for these characters, just go ahead and get these two. I highly, highly doubt you are going to be disappointed with either of these two figures in hand. Marty just so happens to be my favorite of these two. I think the proportions are slightly better than Doc. I also like his head sculpt a little bit better. Then again, Doc does have some badass accessories, and when you give him the long rifle and that long coat, oh, he looks like he could kick some serious ass. If you're a cowboy fan and a Back to the Future 3 fan, I reckon these are probably going to make their way into your collection. And I wouldn't blame you. They are going to stand out. People will see this in your collection room and say, hang on a second. Is that Doc Brown and Marty? They're in cowboy outfits. That's right, Back to the Future Part 3. They went to the Old West. These figures, they are conversation starters. And that's all we can hope for in our collection. Something that catches the eye. And these two will do just that. Now, I got mine from toyswonderland.com. Link for that is in the description below. They have Pay in 4 and a loyalty program. While you're down there, why not hit that subscribe button, bell notification icon, and join button? If you like the sound of seeing your name in the end credits of my reviews. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.